Welcome to Superlative. I am your podcast host, Ariel Adams. In each episode, you will meet someone who has inspired or takes inspiration from today's wristwatch industry. Every week, let's dive deep into the world of crafting exotic timepieces, from the people who dream them up to the people who dream of them. It's time to get started and meet today's guest. Hey everyone, this is Ariel Adams with the Superlative Podcast. My guest today is Mr. Kristof Devos. He is an artist, and some of the things he's most well known for are illustrating children's books, as well as designing a couple of watches. Kristof, welcome.
Thank you. Very excited to be here, Ariel.
I've seen your name a number of times proudly mentioned by Mr. Jones Watches, because you have done at least 4, maybe more different watches with them so far. Talk a little bit about getting into wristwatch design.
I really felt it was really an accident that I started doing this. I just finished a book in, I think it was 2019, and won a couple of awards for that book. So I got
Congratulations.
Thank you. I had a little confidence, which is good because I'm not the most confident person out there. And I was following Mr. Jones Watches, was really in love with what they did. And the confidence gave me just enough energy to send out an email to Kristof Jones, who is the founder of Mr. Jones Watches, and tell him, hey, I'm this person. I just won this and this award. Could I design a watch for you? And
that's pretty bold.
Yeah, I know. It's not normally not what I do. And he said, yeah, go ahead. We'll see if it works out. And I remember this being just 1 or 2 days before I took a trip to Bulgaria. But I was really excited to start working on those watches. So I drew a couple of watch designs on the airplane. And those designs include a perfectly useless afternoon and a perfectly useless morning.
So those are the first 2?
Those were the first 2, and also the first 2 released.
There's a lot to unpack here. And now I want to talk a little bit about your education. Now, I have been privileged to bring a number of people on the Superlative show who are watch designers. And what I find so intellectually rewarding is that most watch designers that I've spoken to have a completely different educational background. There's always an artistic element, don't get me wrong. But how they get to saying, I designed a watch, not only is, like you said, by accident, but the skills that they have, very random, from some traditional artistic techniques to building things to music, to many different types of disciplines. So let's talk a little bit about your creation as an artist. What was your education? What did you go to school to do in terms of art?
Well, I studied graphic design in Lucas School of Arts. It's a master's degree, which I finished in, I think, 2005.
And where is the school? Is this you're in Belgium?
Yes, I'm in Belgium, and the school was in Ghent. Well, it's still in Ghent.
Okay.
And it was when I really finished school that I thought, well, I chose the wrong profession. I want to be an illustrator. I want to make children's books.
Would you explain to people who don't really know the difference how a graphic designer illustrator's work is quite distinctive from one another?
That's a difficult question, actually, because there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences also. I think what is maybe the biggest difference is that in as an illustrator, you are always working with a narrative, with a story. But every graphic designer would probably tell you the same thing. But the narrative is the most important thing as an illustrator, according to me. And I think for me, this is the big difference between the two. There's a lot of room to tell a story, to express 1, 2, or more feelings as an illustrator, which is not always possible as a designer, as a graphic designer.
Is there anything different about the tools? Of course, there's, using traditional medium, drawing, painting, whatnot, and of course, there's digital ones. But do illustrators today and graphic designers more or less use the same tools, or do they use very different tools, whether they're physical tools or software tools?
I think both. I think everything starts on paper, whether you're illustrating or making a graphic design. But then things start to mix up. As a graphic designer, I think you're more drawn to Photoshop, Illustrator, and design. It's also possible for me to use as an illustrator, but I use now as a digital tool Procreate on an iPad Pro mostly, which is not a graphic design tool. It's very similar to paper, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I always find it fascinating. I have, a childhood set of experiences doing art.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got a little older, I saw that tablets came out, the Wacom tablets, and then of course the proliferation of the basically software palettes where you no longer limited by colors or pens. It's really just about how good of a stylus and pad that you had. And I saw this interesting shift, and now I see a further shift into three-dimensional, graphic design. As an adult right now, I know very little about the modern software. I am horrible with Illustrator, but I'm so fascinated how the intersection of the tools and the art form go together. And I believe that this tool-based relationship to the job, which is graphic designer, illustrator, artist, is why there's such an intersection with watches, right? Any type of tool appreciating profession is going to somehow see something in watches, right?
Yeah, that's right. But I try to use, I have only been drawing digitally since 2019, actually. And
you held out. Good for you.
Yeah, I held out a lot. Because I believe it's very important to learn the tactile experience on paper.
Yeah, I have to agree.
And I do draw the same way on my iPad than I do on paper. I use the same digital counterparts of materials. I use the pencil, I use ink, paint, and I work the same old-fashioned way. I think you could really make the equation with the acoustic guitar and the electric guitar. It's you still have to play guitar. You still need to know how to play guitar, but your box filled with tricks is a little bigger on the electric guitar. It's the same thing with digital drawing.
That's a good analogy. I like that. Now, let's go back to you designing a watch. My question is, how long were you interested in watches before you ever, did your first watch dial on paper? Or was it the type of thing where you weren't really into watches and you're like, this is an idea? Talk about your status as a watch enthusiast prior to ever doing a design.
Oh, there was no interest in watches whatsoever.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I was a bit worried about this interview today because I don't really have that much to tell about watches. I don't know anything about them. And I actually want to keep it this way too. Because, Mr. Jones, they make very unusual watch designs. And I think what keeps them fresh is that they work with designers that don't know how a watch looks like. Actually, when I started drawing for them, Crispin asked me, should I send over some technical details? I said, please don't. Because everything you learn, everything you know about technicalities, about certain watch brands and their history will be limiting to me. I will think of all those historical references or those technical details, and it will somehow block my artistic ability to design something fresh. And
you need to have, I call it having artistic blinders on. You can't be distracted because then you could accidentally be influenced, and sometimes you can't control this. And when you really want to be original, you want to avoid being influenced.
Absolutely. So it's not that I'm not interested in the watch design or in the watch community. I really am, but I want to stay very far away from that. It's more or less the same with my books. When I started out... Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to talk more about your books later. That's definitely an important topic. But when it comes to design, I have to continue on the topic because, maybe at first when you're designing watches, you're like, I don't want to be inspired. I don't want to be influenced. I'm doing my own thing. But now that you've done a few, you can't help but notice others and now have an opinion. And my question is, based upon the opinion that you've now developed, what are some other watch styles that you just happen to like? You just happen to think that's well done, or that's pretty, or that's legible, or what has caught your eye now in the several years which has gone by since you first started doing watch design?
Well, it would have been nice to give this really interesting answer to your question now. But, keeping myself blind is something I consider very important. So
okay, you went all in.
There really aren't a lot of watches that I know, or even brands. When I see something about watches, because the Instagram really gives me a lot of commercials, a lot of advertising on watches.
Sure.
I really ignore them. I don't want to have a deep look. I really want to stay fresh. So it's been 4 watches now, and I want to make the 5th one as I want to approach it with the same freshness as I approached my first design.
I think that's a great perspective for sure. And again, all I can do is validate that, because I think that there's a lot of utility there. There is a lot of people who have the opinion that the best thing to do is more or less what people want. And what people want, you need to look across the aisle and see what other people are doing and then make a small variation on it. And that's what you're doing, because what you're trying to do is make what people want. But that's not what every artist wants to do. Of course, to be successful, people need to enjoy it, but having something meaningful is probably the most important. But then there's sort of the ego that comes in, and that's where the originality part comes in. It's like, it's not even so much like a commercial thing. Like, people might still buy it, but again, I want your opinion here. But if you accidentally do something that others did, it would hurt you so much to believe that someone thought, oh, this artist is trying to copy this other thing, even though that's not what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah, I think I have the lovely people from Mr. Jones Watches as a backup there, because they do have a lot of knowledge about watches. And when I present something to them, they will definitely say, oh, this remembers me. This reminds me of this or this watch. Hasn't happened. So I'm really happy about that.
Okay, so I want to go back to the story where you solicited Crispin Jones of Mr. Jones Watch and said, Mr. Jones, I like what you do. I want to make a watch for you. You weren't interested in watches, but you were interested enough to solicit someone who you felt, probably could say yes. I agree, you've targeted the right brand. But out of all the things you could have done, what inspired you to do a watch? It's a real challenge. You're not the first designer to accept the call of the watch dial. Like, it is a thing. But where did you hear that making a watch was a particular challenge and also potentially quite rewarding?
Well, the only thing I was thinking was, it would be really cool to be able to wear your own watch.
Okay.
That's it. That was a drive that put me in contact with Mr. Jones.
It doesn't require more than that. So let's talk about the first watch that you did, which is the perfectly useless afternoon. I reviewed the XL version of it on aBlogtoWatch, the mechanical version. There's also a quartz version. There's been at least 3 or 4 different versions of this so far, in addition to the evening version, which is, again, just that. It's called the Perfectly Useless Evening, and it has some different color tones and things like that. I want to describe this watch for people. I think it's very clever. It depicts the motif of a swimming pool. And in the swimming pool, as you might experience with certain Olympic pools, there's this grid. But the lines are wavy as though you're looking at it through water, which is such an interesting effect. And one of the first really clever things that I saw on this watch. Now, to tell the time, you have hands, but they're actually discs. And on the discs are 2 different pictures. One is the hour hand and one is the minute hand. And one of them has I guess a rubber duck, a duck toy, that moves around as one indicator. And the other, which is larger, which I'm guessing is the hour indicator, is a person sitting in an inner tube, looking at, I believe, actually, I have the watch in front of me. It looks like it's a little book. It's not even clear, man, woman. I don't even think it matters. But there's just, and then it circles around the dial. The positions of the person in the inner tube and in the pool and the duck move around as it indicates the time. It's just enough detail to be artistic. It's minimalist enough that you can read the time. Would you say that I did a good job describing it? What would you add, Kristof?
It's a perfect job. What I found really important is that you shouldn't be able to see whether it's a man or a woman. And there's even a skin tone that's not really describable. He or she is not white or black. It's something in between. I found it really important to have this person be as, I don't know what the word is. Yes, as relatable as possible. What could maybe be added is that I use the swimming pool tiles as a way to help
For the indicators.
For the indicators as a way to help you read time. I want it to be really easy to read time once you know how the watch works. Actually, reading time on this watch, I wanted to have people experience this as something that is almost hidden inside the design. And the design also started with a narrative. It didn't start with the idea, let's make a swimming pool. It started with a quote by Lin Yutang. It's a Chinese philosopher, artist, teacher, and a lot of things. And the quote is, if you can spend a perfectly useless afternoon in a perfectly useless matter, you have learned how to live. It's something I heard when I was still studying, so it's a long time ago.
Right.
And I really know this quote by heart because I find it so important to waste time, to be able to waste time.
Sort of like the value of unstructured activity?
Really, really, yeah. The value of doing nothing. It's something we don't do a lot.
Now, Mr. Jones as a brand has had a lot of watches with a message in it, right? And Crispin Jones himself has had messages, impactful ones. What exactly is the message here? Now, you said that the narrative is important to you, and maybe it is for people to sort of pursue perfectly useless afternoons. But talk a little bit more about the greater, the values that you're trying to convey here. What do you want the world to do now after they've experienced this composition?
Well, I guess we as people have this weird relationship with time. We have not the best relationship with it, I guess. We are always hasty. It's a rat race. And every time you need to check your watch, it could be a stressy time. And I wanted to turn that around and make looking at your watch relaxing. Checking the time could be something relaxing, could be something that makes you feel calm, makes you feel comfortable. That's behind the narrative, and it's really something I wanted to express with the design.
How difficult was it to come up with that first watch? I mean, once you look at it, it looks simple, but the reality is that getting it just right, putting all the composition together, it is probably so much trial and error. And I'm just curious, what was the design journey like in getting there?
Well, mostly a design journey looks like this. You take 2 hours to have a good idea and then another 10 to make it look like you made it in 5 minutes. That's valuable for most of my designs, but not for the useless afternoon watch. This is really drawn on the airplane and it's made probably in 10 minutes. I have 2 versions of it. I have my sketchbook with me here. One was with 2 swimmers, but I didn't find that very good. And then I came up with a rubber ducky and drew something in my sketchbook that's actually almost identical to the final design. It also went really fast with Mr. Jones watches. I submitted this design, I think it was June, probably the end of June, or maybe early July. And they already released it, I think 3 or 4 weeks later, because it was was feeling good. It was a summery watch.
Yeah.
And they wanted to have this summery vibe, not in October or November. They wanted to release it super fast.
Do you have a personal interest in swimming? What does this say to you? I mean, obviously there's a lot of ways of spending a perfectly useless afternoon. Why for you, I guess, relaxing in a pool? I mean, it's funny because I have a watch I designed that's also swimming themed, very different, but I also have an affinity for swimming. For me, it's also a good, waste of time, so to say. So I'm just curious about your personal relationship with swimming.
It's not a big one. I do enjoy swimming, especially with my children, but the watch is more about the floating. And this is something I really like. If you can, on a summer day when there's a little sun, you are able to float on the water. The little movements that the tube in this case makes. It's something I really like. It adds something more to the relaxation.
I mean, I've pointed this out in the past that when a watch is able to remind you of an experience or an activity that you like that's successful. Like if you give that a feeling to the consumer, you're going to sell watches.
Yeah.
And you have to start by doing it for yourself. And the trick is what means something to you and the other person. And you talk a little bit about wanting to make sure that there's certain ambiguities in terms of the person. It could be anyone. This, of course, is part of that process of making it relatable. But I just want to point out the challenge of taking something which has meaning to you as the artist and translating it into a generic enough message that other people might be like, oh, I see what you did there. That's awesome. That's, I talk a little bit about what you go through as an artist. Again, maybe going to graphic design school helped train you to always think about others. But talk a little bit about having to make something that means something to you also means something to others.
That's kind of difficult because I start out with no audience in mind except myself now at age 41 and myself at age 8 or 9. This is for a book, but also for a watch. I just want to make something that I would like or would have liked as a kid and that I still like now. And this way, I think it becomes playful. But it's playful because you can like it as a child. But it also has this, it's maybe a big word, but this philosophical undertone that you get when you grow older. And I didn't really know about the watch community back then. I think it would have really blocked me because I would have thought, oh, all those guys are like those really expensive watches and things that would really not have made a perfectly useless afternoon if I had known about the watch audience. Now I have learned during time that even people who appreciate, let's say, a $300,000 watch will also appreciate a perfectly useless afternoon because of its, because of its creativity, because of the way it's made in London by Mr. Jones, by this great team that does everything to make you a great watch, but also have a great experience while buying it, while wearing it. If it needs repairs, they are there for you. So I think it's the whole package that really works, considering these watches.
Well, Kristof, you got lucky in that you found Mr. Jones Watches, a company that happens to sell products for what they need to be and not too much more expensive than that. Mm-hmm. And there's an accessibility that just happens to be built in to the brand. Most of your colleagues who have the call of the watch and want to design something are not really approaching companies that sell watches at affordable price points and have to jump through a lot of different types of hoops. You, of course, recognize that you were fortunate in your ability to connect with a company that was not only open-minded, but that was priced for a mainstream, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's priced for a mainstream. And still, I hear from a lot of people, whoa, those watches are expensive.
Really?
Yes, when you have the afternoon mechanical or enjoy the ride, they're like about 600 euros, which is a lot for somebody who doesn't know the prices of watches, who isn't really into watches. But I have the feeling that these products, these watches of Mr. Jones, they appeal to an audience that finds these watches rather cheap. I have seen them appear in blogs that talk about how to make a watch collection with only $1,000. But it also appeals to people for whom this is a big investment and who normally don't buy watches. So I think the price point is really nice, really good. They're affordable enough for somebody who wants something special and finds this expensive, and also for somebody who has the money and for whom this is a cheap watch.
No, I'm really glad that you pointed it out. And just so you know, on my end, for a very long time, I've been advocating to the more accomplished collectors out there that there's all these great watches out there at lower price points. Mm-hmm. Yes, they may not necessarily have all the materials or features, but they're very well made and they're cool. And you can cycle them in to wearing with, other much more expensive ones. And I'd say that I've largely been successful in that. And companies like Mr. Jones Watches, again, you don't necessarily know this, but we've, on aBlogtoWatch, have been covering them really prior to any other watch collector publication. It's been something that we've just, because I've reached out to Crispin myself in a different way than you did and say, hey, I gotta cover your stuff. I want to go and talk a little bit about you being an illustrator and some of the children's books and things like that. Before I do that, I want to come up with a word that I think you'll agree with, and that's intuitive. I imagine that if you're trying to design something for the 8-year-old version of you, like most 8-year-olds, they need things that are relatively intuitive to grasp. And I think that you were, again, fortunate and lucky that good watch dials need to be intuitive. You shouldn't have to explain too much in terms of how to read it. And maybe that drive, which again was about appealing to an 8-year-old, also allowed you to think about legibility and the intuitiveness of what am I seeing here. Of course, there's still art watches, so there's that. But would you agree that that had a big part to do with maybe some of the success of your designs?
Yeah, definitely. What I have seen 2 or 3 years ago, there was this YouTuber called PewDiePie. He has like many followers.
Okay, yeah, the video game, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know much about him, so I'm probably wrong.
I've never seen it, but he was in the news for being very popular until he was dethroned by someone. But he would play video games. Anyways, go on.
Yeah, well, he talked about watches he saw on TikTok, I think, and then he saw Perfectly Useless Afternoon. He talked about it for about 3 seconds, but he responded like a child to it. He said, "Oh, what is this? Oh, I get it. It's cool." And that's exactly what I wanted to do with the watch, that you don't need explanation, that you get some sort of a feeling with it, and that you grasp how you read time on it. And I think this works, and it's definitely intuitive.
I mean, that is so important, because I think what you are up against, and you don't know it, but it's so many art watches that are artistic, yes, but are illegible. Yeah. And this is a real problem, because you want to be able to first be a good watch and then add an artistic layer on top of that. And that's really what I try to explain to designers who ask me, what are some of the fundamentals? It can't be beautiful first. It has to be a good tool first. And then after you make it a good tool, you can add a layer of beauty on top of it. And I think that that's where the industrial design and the artistic design, the priorities sort of have to come into play. And people that are purely artistic designers, they don't always think of the industrial side, right?
Yeah, I think to me it has to be both. I think it has to be legible, but not legible first and not legible second, but it has to be legible. And it has to be this artistic narrative that you bring at the same time.
Well, I'm not talking about a desirable wristwatch. I'm just saying a clock in terms of it being taken seriously, or a watch being taken seriously. It has to solve that purpose. I guess what I should say is you don't see people wearing illegible watches very often. Yeah. They don't end up on wrists. People just seem to not choose them, I'm guessing because they wear it a little bit like, that's pretty, but I can't use it. And so my judgment of people's wearing preferences through many years of observing people is that people tend to choose watches that are legible and beautiful. So you're right, but oftentimes there's beautiful things out there that are not legible, and they're not chosen. And so I guess the easiest thing for me to say is you have to do one first and the other. But again, that's just a matter of semantics. They just both need to be in there. You're absolutely right. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So again, you're agreeing. He's nodding his head. I can see the video. You can't. Hi, this is Ariel Adams, founder of aBlogtoWatch, with a message about eBay. I visit eBay daily and have been relying on eBay to learn about and acquire watches for more than 20 years. Did you know that you can now buy watches directly from brands or their authorized dealers on eBay? Timepieces coveted by watch enthusiasts from brands like Zodiac, Laco, Parallel, and more are part of eBay's Certified by Brand program. Here's how it works. Luxury names are partnering with eBay to bring brand new and pre-owned watches and other luxury accessories directly to you. Certified by Brand includes a minimum 1-year factory warranty for watches and offers an unprecedented selection of new and used watches directly from the source, all with the peace of mind you can expect from eBay. Visit ebay.com/certifiedbybrand for more information. So let's talk about books a little bit. You talk about narrative. What is different about telling stories to a children than an adult?
Not much, because I believe a good children's book is also something that you can read and enjoy as an adult. And I think what is common in all my books is that they are also made for an adult. And there are layers there or storylines that are easy to miss as a child, but not as an adult. And also the other way around. So I really make books also for the 41-year-old me and the 8-year-old me. It's all about the narrative. It's all about the story. And I don't think a book is so much of a difference than a watch. I think they're more or less the same thing. They tell a story, but one story just works better in a book and the other works better on your wrist.
What's the first story that you tried to tell in book form?
It's a book called Nooit is voor altijd. I would translate it as Never is Forever. And it's a very, very personal story that I really need to give some background about that. I told you about when I finished my studies in Ghent that I wanted to be a children's book illustrator.
Yeah.
And I immediately started working on a book. But I also had to start making money. So I also started as an art director in an agency back then. Soon became a creative director there and really didn't have time for that book. Although I had a book deal by then, it ended up crashing because I couldn't work on that book. And I thought, well, this is it. I tried. I didn't make it. So have to be happy that I tried it, but it won't work out for me, the book dream. And I think this was 2005, 2006. And in 2008, something really important happened in my life. And that changed everything until this day. Two friends of mine got married. And my wife and me gave them a short trip to Germany as a present.
Okay, nice.
We were driving to Germany and just minutes before we arrived at our destination, we got hit by a car. It was a really big accident. We were thrown, I think, 15 meters away, and everything changed. I still remember the crushing sound of the metal to this day. It's something I will never forget. I was the first to get out of the car to check everyone. I thought my friend. I was sitting in the passenger seat in front. My friend who was driving, he looked okay. Although I could see the door on his side was like his leg was kind of folded in the door. I saw my wife who was sitting behind me. She was acting really weird. Afterwards, we heard she had a major concussion. And I saw his wife who was sitting behind him, still sleeping. So I thought, oh, everything's okay. With her, she has the least damage of all. But when I turned around, I didn't hear anything. And I turned around and there were 2 helicopters over there. There were 3 ambulances. There was this big red fire truck that I didn't hear coming. And that made me realize how severe, how big this accident has been. Then I took another look at my friend's wife. And then I started to see that she wasn't sleeping. I watched her dying. And I didn't realize it at that moment.
Oh my gosh.
That was, I can continue talking about this, but it's a long story how we ended up in different hospitals. And I got a phone call a couple of hours later from her doctor saying she died, which confirmed the thing I was afraid for. So the years following were really hard. I think I experienced those years on autopilot, something like that.
Sure.
Don't have a lot of memories from then, but it also like it confirmed the cliche that to me that you really have to do something with your life. I was 26 back then. It's not the age where you lose friends normally, and it really made me realize that I have to, if I have dreams, I have to at least try them a couple of times to make them reality. So I made a book called Never is Forever, and it's about death. I wanted to somehow work with the story, with the thing I experienced, but not that much that it's about a car crash. So it's a book about a boy who loses his sister, and he's the entire book, he's trying to answer the question, what is death? Whereas my sister now, it also stays unanswered in the book, but the book is about his quest to really learn to live with his sister's death, like I made this book to learn to live with my friend's death. So this was the first book. It was a really difficult one to make, but in the end, I'm really proud of it, and I'm also proud that this has been my way to deal with her death.
Did the book feel good? Was it a successful therapy?
For me, it was a really successful therapy. It didn't make me get over it. I don't really believe in getting over something because it feels like you are forgetting something. It's not like that. But it really made me think, reflect more about what happened, and give place to a couple of things. So it's when I see the book, I'm looking at it right now. I see a lot of things that I would do different today. I just celebrated my 10 years as an illustrator now, and I draw differently. I work differently. But this book, I would never change. It's sort of a border between the life I had and the life I had before and the life I had after the accident.
So
it's
I
like
have
I've
to
lived
ask,
the two lives.
Mr. Jones, one of the the watch that got him famous was his Memento Mori watch, the one that has the hands that say "Remember, you will die." For some people, that is uplifting. For some people, it's very threatening. Where do you fall on that? What is your own relationship to the "Remember, you will die" watch and this concept of Memento Mori?
I think it's a very joyful message because it's so important. I also made the watch Enjoy the Ride. I don't know if you know this one with the Ferris wheel.
I haven't seen it personally, but I've seen pictures. It's very beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It's also about enjoying life. It's also about enjoying the moment, enjoying the ride we're all having here, even if it has life has its downsides. So I think the Memento Mori it's an important message. I think the whole experience I just talked about has made me more humble. It has made me more reflective. It has made me more open to people. So it has also done good things to me. And one of the most important things is that I don't worry about the small frustrations in life, or I try not to worry about the small frustrations in life anymore because they are really not that big of a deal.
That's true, and obviously probably good as a parental role model. I have kids as well, and I know how sometimes kids make a big deal, and what they want you to do as an adult is be like, no, it's not a big deal, relax. Have you ever tried to... It can also
be annoying for someone when you say that too much. It's not a big deal, relax. They find you annoying. But yeah,
it's all about the way you say it, of course. You know what I mean?
I need to work on that.
You have to take them seriously, but they want to believe that you have the solution to the thing that they're scared of.
Yeah.
My question next is about children's watches. And, you've done children's books, you've done some adult watches, which again, you could wear as a kid. They're very playful. But if you had to do some children's watches, which you may do, what would those be like? What are some of the stories you'd like to tell to a child through a wristwatch?
I have no idea. I don't think they would be so much of a difference than my other watches. Probably they would be cheaper to make them more affordable, to not make parents scared to give them to a child. But I think it will also be a watch that has some important narrative, something that's important to me at least. Like my daughter, she's 5 now, and we were in Prague a couple of months ago. And from a friend that lives there, she actually was gifted a watch, and it's this koala bear with a wristwatch inside of it. I don't like it because it's so big, and well, she likes it, of course, but the koala bear is bigger than the watch itself, and it takes away all the attention, and there's no interaction actually initially between the dial, between the watch, between the hands. And the koala, it's just like it's an ornament, it's decoration. And I don't like to decorate things. I think as an illustrator, you really have the job to tell story through a work of art. And it would be, I don't know what it would be about, but I think actually Perfectly Useless Afternoon could have a kids version. Why not?
What would be the kids' version of that? It's, it would be some slightly different activity. What, I think of Calvin and Hobbes, right? When I think about artwork and kids, Calvin, hanging out lazily on the summer. What would be your choice of an activity that would be kids
I think
messing around?
It could actually be the same thing with a kid laying in the pool, because that's also how I approach a book. I take children very seriously, and I'm really afraid to make something that looks childish, because if something is childish, it's also not made for a kid. You have to take them seriously. That's why my first book is about death. It's a children's book. But children also experience death. They also have parents or grandparents who die, even brothers and sisters who are in hospitals and die. So, so they're just little grown-ups. And I think they have a much broader look at life than we as adults do. We have been, confronted with a couple of things that have made us what we are today. But you can talk to a child about just about anything. And I think talking through a watch is the same thing. So it can be a person laying in the pool. It can be an adult in the pool. It can be a child, which will they probably relate to more. But I don't think it has to be a typical activity like, let's say, playing with a doll or whatever. I think this could also work for a child, the pool setting.
There's a lot of options. I mean, again, in my curiosity for timepieces, decided to review some children's watches from time to time on aBlogtoWatch. And there's been a couple of interesting ones from others like you who are professional designers that have a concept. And I just love it. My daughter's still too young. My son's 5, and he's been given a couple of watches, nothing too expensive. And it's really interesting for me to see his reaction. He doesn't wear a watch on a regular basis. He is interested in some watches. He seems to think that it'll be this thing he does as an adult. But I am fascinated by seeing his exposure to this world. I never had this exposure to all these different watches growing up. He's going to have seen like incredibly artistic watches, including yours, around on a regular basis. What he will make of all this, because all he's seeing is like the top narrative, right? He's seeing like the best watches. Is he going to be someone who will appreciate this, or will he just lose interest and pick up something? I don't know. Almost, it's sort of like I just have to sit back and wait, right?
Yeah, he's looking at a very slow cartoon. It's a movement, it's an animation, and if you can't read time yet, I think it's very interesting to see it change once in a while.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the feedback that you've received from the watch community. There's the Perfectly Useless Afternoon, Enjoy the Ride, A Perfectly Useless Evening. There's also the Perfectly Useless Morning, which is a slightly different take and sort of fall themed, which is quite pretty. Mm-hmm. What has been some of the feedback from the community that you are now taking into maybe some of the next decisions you make? Because I hope that you'll make more watches. And of course, you have your own feelings, your own inspiration. But of course, the feedback the community gets, it's a different type of inspiration because it helps you. It helps validate one direction or maybe say another direction is merited. Talk a little bit about some of the feedback and how you've incorporated it into your process.
Well, I try not to get too involved with feedback. I do read feedback, but I waited a long time to read feedback on my watches. Same with my books. And one day I realized that there were tens of people making YouTube videos about A Perfectly Useless Afternoon because I heard it from other people. Hey, have you seen your watch on YouTube? People are making videos on this. So I watched a couple of those. I read a couple of reviews, and the professional reviews, professional feedback, like from you and other watch, how do you call them? Watch people, have been mostly very positive. And from people reacting to those articles online, there have been like two ways. I think most is positive or very positive. People really liking or not liking it. Either way, how it looks or what the message is or both. And also people saying, oh, what is this? It's a piece of junk. It's a perfectly useless watch. Yeah, I've read that a couple of times, or people saying, "Yeah, how do you read time on this?" And this really doesn't hurt. It's actually lovely to read this clash in opinions, and people then start making arguments about why it's this good or what this. So I don't like feedback to become part of my design process. I really like to stay away from it, reading it in small parts, small gasps, not to take too much of it in it, because I think it would be, I think if you read too much, it can be suffocating, whether it be good or bad feedback. I think all feedback is actually good. You can do something with it. But I don't try to make this something that becomes important in decisions that I make when I'm designing something.
Okay, that makes sense. What about with Mr. Jones and their team? Because you're not a watchmaker, and there are certain things like the movements, the positions of things, the case size, certain colors and stuff like that. How do you collaborate with them on that? Do you find that enjoyable? Because I think that, you have a bright future in doing more of this. I want to see a lot more Kristof Devos designed watches. I'm just curious about how you are, at least developing, because you want to do different things all the time. And yes, to a degree, you need to work into a vacuum, but also you need a feedback cycle, a loop that allows you to improve. And that's how you make better watches next time, which is a slightly different calculus than with art, because arguably maybe you can make art you like more and more, but the ultimate, when you're making art isn't to improve upon, it's to make new expressions. So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I when I'm working on something, whether it be a watch or something else, let's talk about the watches. My first round of feedback is with my wife and kids. I just want to see how they respond to it, which is not always what I expected it to be. Like, my wife really didn't like A Perfectly Useless Afternoon. Now she does. And then the second round is sending it to Mr. Jones Watches. And I really appreciate working together with them. They have the great feedback. And they look at a design as a team. So it's not just Crispin or 2 or 3 people. I have the feeling that everyone has something to say about a watch design. They have a really great feeling about this. And collaborating with them has been a joy from start to finish. So, as I mentioned, I don't know that much about watches or mechanics. So when they say, let's make this one like Enjoy the Ride in this big case, the mechanical watch, I really have to look up on Google what is a mechanical watch, and say, oh yeah, it sounds good, and pretend that I know everything about what they are saying. But they make suggestions about material, about color, and I take them in a very high value, and it really feels like a collaboration because I make a design decision. They react to that with materials or suggestions. And then I react to that and I can say, I like it or I don't like something. And then they try it out. We make prototypes. They send it over to Belgium really fast. So that I get to see the watch and feel it and experience it. It's a lot better to respond to a prototype than to a picture of that prototype.
Absolutely.
So I really like the way we can work together. I've been there a couple of times in London. It's not too far from here. It is a bit difficult, or it has become more difficult since Brexit. Now you need the international passport, and it feels like you have to do a lot to get inside the country. It's with the check-in procedure and everything. But I like going over there and seeing those people working. And seeing them evolve. I think when I started out with the afternoon watch, I think they were with 6 to 8 people working there. And now I think it's about 41 people in 4 years of time. So they are growing fast. And I think they are experiencing some growing pains, which are actually luxury pains. Like, my watches have been sold out very frequently for the last year. So it's not nice when someone wants to buy something and sees it sold out, but it's also good. It means they are reaching
Absolutely
a larger audience. So, and I think they are handling it very well, this growing, but I can only guess this is really difficult for them because everything is hand assembled in London. You have to find the right people for that. The last time I was there, I tried to assemble just putting an hour hand to a watch. I really couldn't do it. It's so difficult.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. And you have then the things like dust. When I was doing it, I think the watch would have been filled with dust. So it's so many things to consider when you're assembling something that really not everyone can do this.
I was visiting the Mr. Jones watch facility. I think it was less than a year ago I was there. And I saw exactly what you're talking about. They're growing and they need to grow again. They've been selling out of a lot of stuff. I think that what makes me feel good and comfortable is when I speak to Crispin, he doesn't want to go the traditional route of increasing prices, becoming more luxury. He's very dedicated to an accessible price point and having a broad range of products, especially those that don't alienate the customers that have made the brand as successful as it is. So I agree with you. They're on a right track. But I want to talk about a slightly different type of application for your dials, and that is for smartwatches. And I think that you'll agree that your particular aesthetic would probably fit smartwatches very well. And yes, not all platforms are open, but you have the Garmin's of the world and Samsung's and the Android that allow you to have dials. Some of them are, of course, people can pay for them. You can make a little money that way. Have you ever thought about taking your skills and making smartwatch dials that people can buy, and expanding a little bit into that area and experimenting? Because again, it's another market for what you do well.
Yeah, I have had that question before, but it wouldn't feel good to go this way with a design. Because one of the things I really learned to appreciate in an analog watch is it's an old technology, and it still holds up today. Nothing much, as far as I know, with my limited knowledge about watches, but nothing much has really changed in the essence of what a watch is. And these watches, the afternoon watch, the other watches I've made, they will stand the test of time when if we look 10 years further, people will still be wearing these. When you have an Apple Watch or a Samsung or whatever, the watch you wear today will be hopelessly dated in 10 years. And that's the thing I really don't like about the smartwatch. I don't also like the fact that the dials or the designs are so easily swappable, because it makes me, it's the same experience you have when you scroll on Instagram, the endless scrolling thing. You can also do it with a watch now, with a watch design. And I think it's making the design feel less important, less valuable. So that it's really a big reason for me not to do it. And the other reason would be that I really enjoy working with Mr. Jones so much that it just wouldn't feel right to go to another manufacturer and work for them.
I think what you're saying makes sense. I'm thinking a little bit as a futurist here, and I can see you having an exclusive relationship with Mr. Jones to make your physical watches, yet you can experiment with designs in a very, sort of low risk way, and you can go to them and be like, the ones that work we'll make into physical watches. How about that? So I'm just saying there's an argument to be made. I'm going to have to think a little bit business, but I did go to school to help artists make money going into entertainment law. So I do understand some of the rationale that goes to play here, but it's an interesting way of leveraging an up and coming market. I mean, I've been talking about the smartwatch dial market for almost a decade now and seen it very, very gradually progress. And what it's come down to is a deficiency of both economic incentive, meaning marketplaces where someone can make good money on this, but more importantly, skill. Just because anyone can program a watch dial doesn't mean it looks good. So because, again, as you know, in a lot of artistic things in the internet, the barrier to entry is tiny, right? All anyone needs to do as an illustrator these days is start an Instagram account and be like, look, I can copy stuff, right? Right? Like to an average person, that looks very impressive. Of course, that's not a lot of skill. People do that in school, but that's beside the point. It's easy to put your artistic expressions out there, but it's still difficult, just as difficult ever, to do it well, whether it's illustration or making watch styles. So I'm just prophesizing that there will be a time where I think you could make decent money selling high quality watch styles, on a smartwatch platform.
Yeah, maybe I haven't investigated it, and I think what would be a worry of me is that it would make also feel the work for Mr. Jones feel less valuable. Like when you design a dial for a smartwatch, everything's possible. You only have the limits of your imagination, but I also want to give that same feeling of everything's possible with a mechanical piece, with a mechanical watch. And maybe, I don't know if it's a good worry or not, but I think it would like make this work for Mr. Jones feel easier or less valuable. I don't know. Does this make sense to you?
Absolutely. And what you're saying is the same thing that many other people have said, and they don't want the sense of value in a wristwatch to go down by making it just so easy to replace that aesthetic. I completely sympathize with this, but what I also am is a realist, and I know that the pace of progress cannot be stopped. As much as we want to say, it was really better back then, there's not really too much we can do about moving forward. So what I try to say is, okay, if the future is going to be this way, let's try to make it as nice as possible. And I'll give you the example. When the Apple Watch first came out in 2014, most of the people in the watch industry were saying, yeah, but what does it mean for the status of the traditional watch? And it was like, you people need to get over yourselves. I understand your argument, but the Apple Watch is only going to become a bigger and bigger and bigger deal. Your question isn't, is it good or not? Your question is, how do I work within a world that this is now going to be a dominant player?
Yeah, right. It's the same thing with AI at the moment. You can be against it, or you can be you can like it, but the truth is you have to live with it. Especially
I've still
as a
never
designer.
seen AI do a good watch dial that's original. Okay,
No, not yet.
not going to happen. Look, AI does not come up with original things. It's just a synthesis of things that humans have done before.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But maybe for a lot of people, I hope not. But this will be enough. I don't know.
Again, look, you have to trust in what I call the art market. And the art market is dominated by these very small number of people who know what has and hasn't been done before. Okay? We have to rely on this. I am one of those people in the watch space where I'm like, I know so many watches and I can say this is a good one, right? There's no automated way of doing it. This is a personality-driven, editorialized space. And art and wine and cars and fashion and all these things where everyone's trying to have a beautiful one is still going to be dominated by a couple of tastemakers that are human. So I really think that is where the saving grace is. Yes, there might be the mainstream that is okay with a copycat design, but the industries are still led by those snobs who both want to make original things and who desperately want to see original things.
Yeah, let's hope so. That it stays this way.
We're almost out of time, but I want to know, are you working on a new watch style right now?
Always and not always. So I'm always in let's call it a modus of receiving. But currently I'm working on a new book and a series of 3 magazines to celebrate my 10 years as an illustrator. I did make a new watch design a couple of months ago, but I also showed it to Crispin. I liked it at the time, and so did Crispin. But then I didn't have a lot of time on my hands, and when I revisited the design, I wasn't that happy anymore with it. Neither was Crispin, but definitely will be making more designs in the future.
I think that's very healthy to actually say no. Let's not do this. I think that when people see the final product, the composition that you decided that one should be the one I release, they have no idea about all the rejects. And I guess the more they know about the rejects, the more impressive than perhaps the final one is going to be. Kristof, where can people learn more about you on the internet?
I think the best place to visit me is on my Instagram and my website. I used to have more social media, but I switched to Instagram only because I find it quite distracting to have more media on my hands. So those are the best places to find me.
And don't forget, for those who are listening, you can go to the MrJonesWatch.com website and you can see the various watches that Kristof has designed. There are the perfectly useless series, and enjoy the ride. And it sounds like when he and Mr. Jones himself can decide on a new design, there will be more. What an interesting conversation. This has been the Superlative Podcast with Kristof Devos. Kristof, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariel.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Superlative Podcast. This show relies on support from you, the audience. Please subscribe, review, and share Superlative with your friends. To get the latest watch news and enthusiast commentary, also listen to the aBlogtoWatch weekly podcast. For show ideas, comments, or business, please contact us at podcasts@aBlogtoWatch.com.